motivational documentary. Date: January 1st, 1900. Germany is sprinting into a new century, and the industrial sector is basically speed-running innovation. Inside this hypercharged ecosystem, two separate companies, Daimler Motor and Gesellschaft and Benz and C, are low-key engineering revolutions. Think of them as the OG tech startups of the era, except instead of apps, they're shipping combustion engines that make horses look obsolete overnight. Gottlieb Daimler's team is laser-focused on refining compact, high-performance engines, and their vibe is very move fast and break everything, preferably speed records. Meanwhile, Carl Benz is pushing the boundaries of automotive design with a whole different flavor of innovation. These two companies aren't partners, not yet. They're rivals, each scaling aggressively with military and commercial eyes watching closely. By the early 1910s, Germany's political climate starts heating up. Military procurement offices are scanning the industrial landscape like who can manufacture reliable engines at scale. And surprise, surprise, both Daimler and Benz are at the top of the shortlist. Their factories are cranking out vehicles, engines, and tech that might not be built for war, but could absolutely be pointed in that direction. If the call comes, spoiler alert, that call is coming fast. When World War I kicks off in 1914, both companies get fully absorbed into the war machine. Production pivots hard. Armored cars, aircraft engines, transport trucks, all rolling out of German factories like it's peak season Amazon Prime. Daimler's aircraft engines, in particular, become a major flex for the German Empire. The war accelerates their tech like crazy, forcing breakthroughs that would have taken decades in peacetime. Internally, the companies are growing, but the pressure is unhinged. Resources are tight, government oversight is intense, and the workforce is caught between patriotism and survival. But in the middle of the chaos, one truth becomes obvious. These two rival companies are basically building the same future. They're becoming mirror images, high-performance engineering machines feeding a country in conflict. By the end of WW1 in 1918, Germany collapses in exhaustion, and both Daimler and Benz hit the brakes. Their factories are drained, funding dries up, and the government restrictions from the Treaty of Versailles strip them of military contracts. The flex era is over, and the survive or die era begins. Revenues tank, workers leave, and both companies know the clock is ticking. But instead of folding, they start thinking smarter, slow, quiet, strategic, the kind of synergy a boardroom would call unlocking collaborative value streams. In reality, they're broke, the economy is wrecked, and partnership is the only way out. And in the shadows of that rebuild, the seeds of Mercedes-Benz are planted.
After years of economic turbulence, Benz and C and Daimler Motor and Gesellschaft pull the ultimate power move. They merge. The new brand, Mercedes-Benz, enters the chat like a freshly funded unicorn startup. Germany is still navigating post-World War I poverty, inflation is going sicko mode, and political instability is rising. But the merger gives both companies enough runway to rebuild and reboot their identity. The new entity immediately locks in on one strategic directive: elevate German engineering into a global flex again. Mercedes-Benz launches a new wave of vehicles that scream luxury, precision, and confidence. The brand positioning is tight. We build excellence, period. Their marketing becomes aspirational, clean, and elite, basically 1920s corporate LinkedIn energy. And people buy into it, hard. But beneath that glossy brand architecture, Germany is shifting into something darker. The Nazi Party starts gaining traction through the late 1920s, and by 1933, Hitler is sworn in as Chancellor. Corporate Germany undergoes an immediate vibe shift. Overnight, Every major industrial player, including Mercedes-Benz, is under intense government influence. The Reich wants military mobility at scale, and companies are expected to fall in line. And Mercedes does. Factories that once built luxury sedans start transitioning into dual-use production pipelines. Trucks, heavy transport vehicles, high-capacity engines, everything that German military needs for rapid deployment becomes part of Mercedes-Benz deliverables. In boardrooms, executives talk about meeting state production targets and strategic alignment with national priorities. In reality, it's compliance under a regime that tolerates zero deviation. By the mid-1930s, Mercedes is producing some of the Third Reich's most critical logistics vehicles. The Mercedes-Benz L3000 truck becomes a battlefield staple. Their engines show up in aircraft, armored cars, and staff vehicles. The synergy between government demand and industrial capability turns into a high-output machine. But that machine has a brutal cost, because as Germany ramps toward war, forced labor becomes a core part of its industrial economy. Mercedes-Benz factories begin integrating thousands of forced laborers, prisoners of war, political detainees, and civilians from occupied territories. It's one of the darkest chapters in automotive history. Yet during the war, executives talk about maintaining workforce efficiency, hiding the reality behind corporate jargon while the human suffering intensifies on the factory floors. When World War II erupts in 1939, Mercedes-Benz becomes fully embedded in the German war machine. The company's logistics vehicles support blitzkrieg operations across Europe. Their staff cars transport top Nazi commanders. Their engines power aircraft that bomb cities. Every innovation from the previous decade is now being leveraged for war, speed, and expansion. But success doesn't protect them. By 1943, the Allies are targeting German industrial sites with surgical precision. Mercedes-Benz factories, once symbols of innovation, are now high-priority bombing targets. Air raids devastate production lines, destroy tooling, and flatten entire departments. The brand's infrastructure, built over decades, is disassembled in months under fire. Still, the company tries to keep output alive. Engineers relocate, makeshift workshops appear, and production is scattered across smaller satellite sites. It's one of the most chaotic periods in Mercedes history. Total operational risk, zero stability, all pressure. And yet, like every major German manufacturer of the era, they keep producing until the last possible moment because the regime demands it. By 1945, the war ends, Germany falls, the Nazi state collapses, and the Mercedes-Benz brand is left in ruins, physically, morally, and financially. Their factories are rubble, their workforce is shattered, and their wartime involvement is under Allied investigation. Mercedes-Benz has survived the war, but now comes the hardest rebuild in the company's entire existence.
Motivational documentary. Germany has officially tapped out. The war is over, the Nazi regime has collapsed, and what's left behind is a nation sitting in the shadow of its own catastrophic decisions. For Mercedes-Benz, the situation is a straight-up operational apocalypse. Their factories are bombed-out shells, supply chains are gone, and leadership is under scrutiny for wartime involvement. The brand that once symbolized engineering dominance is now fighting for literal survival. Allied investigators walk through the ruins of Mercedes' Stuttgart facilities like they're auditing a startup that crashed and burned. Machines are twisted heaps of metal, assembly lines are unrecognizable, roof beams hang down like broken ribs. In tech terms, the company has lost its entire infrastructure stack: servers, code base, workforce, the whole ecosystem. But here's where Mercedes-Benz activates one of the coldest comeback strategies in industrial history. They pivot from survival mode to rebuild mode, fast. The Allies greenlight limited production, mostly because Germany needs transportation so badly it's basically a national KPI. Mercedes-Benz starts with the simplest, scrappiest vehicles they can build. Not luxury, not performance, just functional mobility. They take whatever parts they can salvage, retrofit damaged machines, and rebuild sections of factories panel by panel. The first post-war vehicles are humble, almost embarrassed to wear the three-pointed star. But they symbolize something critical. The company isn't dead. The brand equity, the engineering culture, is still alive beneath the rubble. By 1947, Mercedes-Benz gets clearance to resume full-scale civilian production. Engineers who survived the war returned with something to prove. They're running on grit, trauma, and a mission to restore the company's pre-war reputation without repeating its pre-war path. Then comes 1951, the turning point. Mercedes drops the 300 Adenauer and the curvy 220 sedan, and suddenly the energy shifts. These cars hit different. They're elegant, modern, technically advanced, a hard rebranding from military utility to peacetime luxury. The public sees them and goes, yeah, Mercedes is back. But the real mic drop happens in 1954 with one of the most iconic vehicles ever built, the Mercedes-Benz 300 SL Gullwing. This car is pure flex energy. The gullwing doors become a global symbol of innovation. The fuel-injected engine is decades ahead of its time. The world sees Germany and Mercedes not as the villains of a recently ended war, but as pioneers of a new automotive future. That's not just engineering, that's brand rehab on legendary levels. Behind the scenes, Mercedes corporate leadership is hyper-aware of the company's past. They can't erase the wartime chapter, but they can outgrow it. They formalize ethical standards, restructure factories, and rebuild their global footprint with transparency. The company leans into craftsmanship, safety, and innovation, a whole new brand mission. It's basically their "we're not that guy anymore" moment. As the Cold War unfolds, Mercedes pivots into international expansion. U.S. dealerships open, Asian markets activate, African operations scale. The three-pointed star evolves from a Germany-only emblem to a worldwide status symbol. By the 1960s, Mercedes has completed one of the wildest glow-ups in industrial history. They went from facilitating wartime logistics to defining modern luxury mobility. By the end of the decade, the brand's narrative is clear. They started in innovation, fell into complicity, collapsed in defeat, and rebuilt themselves into a new global identity, not by hiding their past, but by engineering their future with ruthless consistency and unmatched technical discipline. Mercedes-Benz closes the post-war era with a bold corporate mantra: "We build for the world, not for the war."